knows all about family, and she knows all about a pawpaw. She called him Grandpap. Reba, would you join me?
How you doing?
Oh, thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Now I want to hear about Grandpap.
Okay, well, my grandpap is my daddy's daddy, like as you know, and he's a very funny character. He was a widower pretty early in life, but he always took care of us kids. Wherever we were up in the mountains, gathering cattle, Daddy would always say, "Oh, hey, you kids!" Ah. Well, we'd never hear a word he said. And we'd all look to Grandpap. What'd Daddy say? What are we supposed to do? And Grandpap would go over the instructions thoroughly, step by step, and let each one of us know what to do. So if it wasn't for Grandpap, us kids probably would still be up in that 8,000 acres in Chalky, Oklahoma, lost.
How about your grandmother? You and I have talked about your grandmother. You've told me some stories about how she influenced your life.
Well, Grandma was our only grandma because Daddy's mama passed away before Alice, my oldest sister, was born. So Mama's mama, Grandma Smith, was a very spiritual woman. We lost her several years ago, but she taught us kids a lot about spirituality. Took us to church as often as she could, but the things that we learned were up on the pond dam or on the creek bank or out picking tomatoes or working the garden. And she'd teach us the things about morals and spirituality and what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do, but in story. And we never knew it was a lesson when she was giving it to us.
But you knew there was a definite line between right and wrong, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
And you have a tremendous work ethic. And I know that because I've watched you for all these years and been through a lot of things with you.
Yep.
And I know that you are determined, that you do not mind working day and night to accomplish what you know needs to be accomplished. And where did that come from?
Well, it's always been around me. Mom and Daddy worked hard, and us kids worked hard. I don't know many kids that nowadays that were expected to work. People would ask me, "How'd you learn how to ride?" And I said, "Well, Daddy threw us on the horse and said, get in there and find some cattle." And not too long ago, a good friend of mine went down and helped Daddy work cattle, and he said, "Can you ride?" And she said, "Well, no." He said, "Well, can you hang on?" And so that was her riding lesson. So we were just always there. Us four kids were pretty much the hired hands, along with Louis Sandman and Grandpap, to go up and help Daddy find the cattle and bring them down the pens and work cattle or ship them out.
So your parents taught you a solid work ethic.
Definitely.
And when you were growing up, your daddy rodeoed, and you went with him a lot. Mm-hmm. All you kids did. Mm-hmm. And I've heard you tell this story 100 times, but I want you to tell everybody else how you kids would sing and how you while away the time on those long hours in the back of that car going from rodeo to rodeo.
Well, Daddy didn't have very much patience at all. And with four kids in the back seat wrestling and fighting and arguing, we always knew that his patience was just about to explode and wear very thin when his arm went up on the back of the seat. Because the next step was going to be start pinching and finding somebody to get a hold of to tell us to be quiet. So it was getting on his nerves. So Mama knew when that breaking point was getting close, and we didn't have a radio in the car. We barely had armrest. And so to pass the time, what we'd do is Mom would get us kids to sing. And she would teach us harmony, and she'd get one of us to sing lead, and then the other would sing harmony, and then she'd let this one sing lead while the other one sang harmony. And we'd sing songs like, "Please, Mr. Custer, I Don't Want to Go," because we was up in Wyoming, and she thought that was kind of a history lesson too. And since Susie, my little sister, her name was Susie, so since she was always in the car too, we'd sing the old Everly Brothers song, "Wake Up Little Susie." She's always sleeping. Daddy'd always say, "Get up and look down the road, you might learn something."
From all those experiences, how do you think this helps you on the Broadway stage with Annie Get Your Gun?
Oh my gosh. Well, Mom always taught us when you start something, you finish it. And so a long time ago when I first got started in this business, I would say, "Oh, Mom, I don't want to go do this," or "It's a 4-hour dance and it's going to be a smoky club and I'm allergic to smoke, I'm dreading it." She said, "Look, you can do anything for 4 hours and it'll be over and we'll just have fun tomorrow. So just go do it because you told them you'd be there." Okay. So I have learned to, when I know I've got a hard job to do, I give it my best. And every time, every night before or afternoon, when that curtain starts to go up, I say to myself, this is going to be the best I can do. And I have more fun doing it that way.
You know, Reba, they say that the West was tough on men and dogs and hell on women and horses.
What I've heard, I believe that.
I sometimes wonder how those ladies kept their sanity, because they often went months without the pleasure of another lady's company. Don't you reckon that was terribly lonesome?
I know it would be, absolutely.
Because you know ladies get tired of talking about horses and cattle and mountain lions. They want to talk about soft and nice things. And somewhere out on the plains of the panhandles of Texas, Oklahoma, or western Kansas, or eastern New Mexico, lived a lady who wrote little sonnets on pieces of linen. And then she'd tie them with ribbons to tumbleweeds and turn them loose in the wind. And the cowboys would find them out on that vast prairie. You know, that must have eased her loneliness a little bit, to know that somewhere, sometime, she had contact with the outside world. And also, can you imagine what that meant to that cowboy who found that sonnet and that thing written on that piece of linen, evidently in a lady's hand, so far away from home and the pleasure of a lady's company? Well, Louis L'Amour took that story. They don't know who that lady was, but he took the story and he wrote a novel about it. And then Sam Elliott and Catherine Ross made a movie called Conager. It was a good movie. But my brother Danny and Ace Ford and I like to think this is the way it happened.
Okay.
Boys. On a fence line north of Estaline, strangest sight I'd ever seen was a note tied with a ribbon to a rolling tumbleweed. Brazos tossed his head and shied, the weed got caught up on the wire. Stepped down from my saddle horse and gave that note to read. Lines that were written in a fair woman's hand told of her life and the loss of her man. Knits her heart and her hopes she has cast in the wind, and it's me that old tumbleweed chose. Fine Red River Road. By the time I'd built the fire that night, I'd memorized every line and felt the silent teardrops that had fallen on that note. When I heard a lonesome coyote cry, it was then I realized Rose and this old cowboy have been too long alone. Lines that were written in a fair woman's hand told of her life and the loss of her man. Knits her heart and her hopes she has cast in the wind, and it's me that old tumbleweed chose. Fine Red River Road. On the north side of the prairie dog, in a dugout faced with cedar logs, was a woman in a cotton dress, the color of the sod. She said the man she loved had died, and so to keep her occupied, she tied notes to the tumbleweeds, trusted them to God. Lines that were written in a fair woman's hand told of her life and the loss of her man. Knits her heart and her hopes she has cast in the wind, and it's me that old tumbleweed chose. Fine Red River Road. In a cedar cabin neath the canyon wall, we light a fire and watch the snowflakes fall. I'm glad it's me that old tumbleweed chose. Fine Red River Road. I love my Red River Road.
Oh, that's pretty.
Thank you.
Oh, enjoyed that. Thanks very much. Great, guys. Great.
Miss Reba McEntire. Thanks, Reba.